Hey, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So if you've ever been part of one of our advanced programs, one of our mentorships or our profiler training or our personality life path mentorship or anything like this, maybe even here on the podcast, I've said it. I have this phrase that I say, it's not original, I forget where I got it, but true learning equals behavior change. Anytime we learn something, we're going to change our actions in our lives. This is one of the things I have a challenge with online is so many people debate and talk about personality type. They talk about type theory. They talk about Jungian cognitive functions. They talk about attachment styles. They talk about Enneagram, and they're not doing a lot. I mean, maybe they are. I don't see a lot of evidence of things being done in the outer world to change their behavior. And I'm realizing we think in terms of like theory and understanding and learning, and then we think of output or behavior, but really there's a step before that. There's a step between those two elements. And that's what we want to talk about today on the episode, on this show, on the podcast, this idea of efficacy. So there's the thing that I'm learning or I'm understanding about myself or the world, and then there's the thing I'm going to do. But before I can do it, I have to believe I can do it. I have to have a faith that I have the capacity to make this behavior change. So I could learn all about, I have ENFP preferences in the Myers-Briggs system. I could learn all about ENFPs. I could study and learn all the theory. I could know all the cognitive functions. I could go deeper into the shadow functions. I could cross it into, move it over into subtypes and then cross-pollinate it with Enneagram styles and socionic, like all these things, right? I can learn more and more and more and more. But if I don't have the belief that I can make a change or an outcome difference in my life or take an action, well, it's going to limit me. I'm probably not going to take those actions. So I think one of the missing ingredients that people have between understanding themselves and personality types and then making real changes is this idea of self-efficacy, this idea of I can do this. I have the capacity. I believe that I can execute in my life and make things happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's an outstanding point, Joel.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
keep the affirmations coming. I love this.
And affirmations will be important in a moment, so I will keep them coming.
We have a framework for this though today. We want to introduce.
Right. So this concept of efficacy, and you use the word belief or faith. The concept of efficacy is a belief, and self-efficacy is a belief that I can make things happen.
Yeah.
I can produce a desired result. Like if I pour myself into it, I believe that I'll get to the other side. And it does take a little bit of faith. It does take some belief that I'll be able to get to the other side, especially if I've taken on a big challenge or if life is throwing me a big challenge. Right now I'm dealing with a lack of self-efficacy. We're in a situation, it's a pretty big challenge. We've had a challenging year that was preceded by another challenging year that was preceded by another one, and so on. I don't remember the last time we didn't have a challenging year.
I'm sure we're not alone. The
No.
third person in this conversation might have also had some challenging years recently.
I believe so. I think a lot of people have dealt with, I mean, it's probably going on half a decade or more of some serious struggle because the world is in turmoil.
Yeah.
In generational theory, we're at the end of what's called winter, at the end of a saeculum, a way of doing things, right? That was supposed to bring a sense of stability. And we're moving out of that. We're at the end of this quote unquote winter time period. And it brings a lot of challenge for people to be in this phase of life. Now, that's assuming generational theory is true, but even if it's not, even if this is like
Just
not part of a cycle, right?
Yeah.
This is a time period of struggle for a lot of people, and we're no different. I'm no different, right? And I'm dealing with a lack of faith in my ability to get to the other side. I can feel it draining me. It drains me of my creativity. It drains me of my willingness to take on more. It drains me of my ability to jump out of bed in the morning. I instead just want to kind of lay there and pull my covers over my head.
It costs a lot.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lack of belief and a lack of faith in oneself is extremely expensive.
And I think it's compounding. It gets worse if you don't address it and you feel less capacity. You feel less confidence over time. One does, not you specifically, although you could as well. That's been my experience in my life. And then the more capacity and the more efficacy, self-efficacy I build, that's also compounding.
Yeah.
I feel like I can do more and I have more capacity. It's like a trajectory you're on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It feels like you're spiraling down or spiraling up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this idea of self-efficacy, this idea of having belief in oneself came up through one of our personal life path mentorship sessions where we were talking about skill and how skill can be something that's, it can be in our way. The concept of it inside of our heads to get to where we want to be. If we're trying to get a sense of empowerment, to change our lives and to design a life that's more ergonomic to our personality type, a fear that we're lacking skills can be a major impediment. Now, that's not the same thing as actually lacking skills. It's a fear of lacking skills. And so when we talk about the subject of, do I have what it takes to make the life that I want to make? One half of the equation is, well, maybe I actually am lacking skill, right? Like there are certain things that I need. Maybe I want to do a job, I want to change my career path and I'm going from one industry to the next. What are the skills I need in order to enter this new industry? So it could be legitimately lacking skill.
Yeah.
Or it could be a fear of missing skills, right? And one has all the skills they need, but there's this sense of, oh no, I'm not prepared enough, right? I need to continue to gather more skill until I feel prepared. The challenge, of course, being that one never feels prepared. They just have to go do it. And then afterwards they go, okay, I got through that. And that's actually how self-efficacy is built. It's built by watching ourselves, just like self-confidence. It's built by watching ourselves overcome obstacles, watching ourselves do things proficiently, observing that we either had the skill the whole time or we built the skill while we were doing it enough to get to the other side. And then we prove to ourselves, we have proof. It's a proof of concept situation. We have to have proof of concept that the belief in ourselves that we had that we could get to the other side had merit to it.
Yeah.
Right? But it is to some extent an act of faith.
Yeah. So I think today what we want to do, if you're listening or watching right now, just give you a simple framework to look at the self-efficacy that you have in your life, maybe some strategies to get more of it, and be able to actually make those behavior changes, take those actions, create in your world what you want to create in your life, no matter what your personality type is. And I think different types will resonate with different aspects of this 4-part kind of framework that we're going to share today.
Right. I do want to make a comment that the lack of it the lack of it is universal.
Yeah.
And the advantage of it is equally universal, meaning that almost everybody, and I'm using hedgy words like almost, but 100% of people lack faith in themselves around something.
Yeah.
And that's just based on personality type concepts as well, right? Like aspects of my life that call upon my preferred functions for, my ENTP type preferences. If it's asking for extroverted intuition exploration or introverted thinking accuracy, I'm on the case.
And if you're saying to yourself, that's not true, Antonia, I don't care about XYZ, not caring about it can also be like a bypass to it, or saying, oh, that's not, like you can cover over the fact that you don't feel confident around something by saying, well, that's not important.
Oh yeah.
You can dismiss it and say, well, it's not important, because you don't feel self-efficacy around it.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's one of the biggest ways that
that's a smuggle.
You mean
Sneaky.
if a person's like, well, I don't lack self-efficacy.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you might just be avoiding everything that reminds you that you're unskilled.
Or marginalize or dismiss something that you actually do need to build it in, but you just don't think it's important.
And yet when life throws us something that requires us to pull on those less preferred functions, if we have not already looked that demon in the face,
yeah,
it gets pretty undermining pretty quick. Like when the world requires, just at my non-preferred functions of extroverted feeling, harmony, or introverted sensing memory, anytime the world asks that of me, I've gotten a little better at rising to the challenge because I'm older, I'm a little wiser. I've done a little bit more work around, integrating those parts of my personality. But then if you start dipping into things like, say, shadow functions, something calls introverted feeling or authenticity up inside me. And I'm like, okay, I'm a sitting duck. I don't know what to do here. Right.
Yeah.
Or extroverted sensing sensation. These are things that I have just struggled with my whole life. And I'm probably going to keep struggling. And that's just how it is. So if we have a sober mindedness about ourselves and we recognize the areas of life that we tend to avoid, or delegate or just pretend that those things aren't important. We're probably talking about things where we lack faith in ourselves. We lack faith in our efficacy, our capacity to get to the other side. So 100% of people deal with this because we all have uncertainty somewhere. But the advantage to it is also universal. If we have a sense of faith in ourselves, take on bigger challenges and high risk, high reward, right? We're going to take on more. We're going to give ourselves permission to say break away from the status quo or question things that might have been unhealthy for us, but were patterns set in front of us. It's going to impact our health because we're going to believe that we can, say, have a healthy body or get to the gym on a regular basis or eat the right foods. It can help us deal with chronic issues, right? Chronic pain, or maybe things where a person this is an area that no amount of self-care will overcome. So you just have to believe that you can overcome them on your own merit, right?
Yeah.
And so there's the spirit will help overcome them if you have chronic conditions. So this is about, it's not just going like, oh, I can do it, so I'm going to go for it. It's a general attitude we bring to the world that I can rely on my own. I can rely on myself. I can rely on my own merit. I've got what it takes. And this is different than, I would say maybe more shallow self-talk.
Yeah.
Which is, like, I'm a boss, or I can do that thing, and like, get out of my way. Like all that kind of machismo that maybe we tend to try to lift our wings on, right? Like all that hot air that we hope will give us elevation ends up being just hot air, right? There's an honesty and a modesty required for self-efficacy. That means that when we are attributing faith to our capacities, it's not baseless. It's something that we have already given ourselves some evidence for, but it requires us, to give ourselves permission to have evidence. And that's part of what you're talking about, like 4 different components or elements that give us this sense of self-efficacy. It's really important to have all 4 of these. And as you mentioned, some personality types will be attracted to some more than others, or, different elements, but we need to have all of this to give ourselves that boost, that faith that is built on, not just hot air, but built on a modest, sober assessment of ourselves, which includes all the good stuff too.
So if you have the owner's manual for your personality type from Personality Hacker, you might want to pull out your car model and look at your cognitive functions and how your mind is wired, how you learn information, how you make decisions. This is going to be unique to you and your personality. This is a general framework we're going to go through. And as you follow along, you can apply this to your own life and your own personality if you pull that car model out.
Yeah. Okay. So these 4 elements, it's kind of a model, but it's more like how-tos.
Yeah.
Right? There are 4 steps or stages or ways to gain more faith in one's ability to perform. And again, it's not hot air. It's not just affirmations that are baseless. They're honest actions a person can take to get to a place where we can trust ourselves to have results, right? To get the things that we want. And this might be particularly true because, at least at the time period of this recording, we're starting to move into a time period where a lot of people are they're going to make life-changing resolutions for themselves. And if you're going to make, say, New Year's resolutions or life-changing resolutions, no matter what time of year it is, self-efficacy is going to be how you make it all the way through, and you don't just abandon ship a couple weeks in.
Okay,
right?
Enough preamble. Let's get to it. I want to know. I want the steps.
Okay.
I think the person listening is too. Let's go. Let's do it.
You're right.
A lot of setup. Let's get right into it.
Stop selling. All right. So this model comes from, or these stages come from, psychologist Albert Bandura, who said that the 4 sources of self-efficacy are 1, mastery experiences; 2, vicarious experiences; 3, verbal persuasion; and 4, emotional and physiological states. So what does that mean? Well, the first thing that we need to do in order to gain self-efficacy is have mastery experiences. So there's 2 ways to do that. The first one is through our own direct experience, watching ourselves do something well. And it doesn't matter how much uncertainty a person has around their incompetence or whether they fear they have enough skills. Everybody can do something well.
Yeah.
Right. And they've mastered something. They can watch themselves perform in some way to remind themselves that they're not totally incompetent. And we might undervalue those things because they're natural talents. We might think, oh, anybody can do this, but not everybody can. Right. That's one of the beauties of personality type is it teaches us to stop overvaluing our experience. It teaches us to start looking at the things that we do well as something that maybe is a unique thing that I bring to the world, not something that is just how things are done.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm immediately, as I look over this list, I'm going to use my intuition to pattern the energies of the cognitive functions against this. And right there, it feels very sensation or extroverted sensing. The preferred function for SPs in the Myers-Briggs system. It's not talking about the experience. It's not thinking about the experience. It's not theoretically theorizing or philosophizing about the experience. It's having the experience and observing you doing the experience as you do it.
Yep.
Which is very extroverted sensing. It's a here and now kind of energy.
Yep, exactly.
No matter where this is in your personality, it's just that's the energy that's baked into that aspect of what you just said.
Yep. We can't just think about the thing. We have to do the thing.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And so the first way to gain a sense of, oh, I can do this is watch yourself do things. Right?
Yeah.
You go, oh yeah, I can do things. I watch myself do them. And so that actual rubber hits the road component is very important.
This is why kids believe they can do so much more, because they just try it. They just get into action. They do it. They're not thinking about it. They just go, there's a mud puddle. I'm going to go jump in that mud puddle. Oh, look, I jumped in a mud puddle. Like, I don't do that as an adult. I always stop myself from doing something directly. Clearly I don't want to get wet, but yes.
Yep.
Point
you
taken.
got it. Yeah. Well, and actually that's a good segue to the second part of the mastery experiences, which is teaching yourself how to learn from failure. So
I hate the word failure.
Right. And a lot of people do.
I like to replace it with calibration.
Yeah.
Learning from calibration rather than a failure.
But that might be a bypass.
Well, because failure is not like jumping in the mud puddle isn't a failure. It's I got information. Now I can calibrate to not jump in the mud puddle. I didn't fail something. Getting messy is not a failure. It's just something that happened.
If your desire was to jump over the mud puddle.
Okay. Fair enough.
You didn't make it.
If I'm yes, fair enough.
And that's
so falling short and accounting for that to calibrate for better times later.
You got it. And failing is actually in and of itself tends to be very undermining to a faith in oneself. Oh, I can't do this. Right. So, to overcome that is to start, it's like reevaluating one's relationship to failure, right? It's like it's recontextualizing it. It's seeing it as something that, and I don't think calibration is a bad word. It's something that can help calibrate a person. It doesn't mean failure is necessarily a dirty word though, in and of itself. And it's like, oh, I failed. And there's so much weight to it. But who are we looking over our shoulder around this failure for? Is it that we're worried we're going to disappoint ourselves? Are we worried we're going to disappoint other people, society, parental figures? Like, who is actually the person who's going to come down on us when we fail? Now, sometimes failures are big enough so that they have consequences that other people suffer. Yeah. And that's not great. But if you can contextualize failure as learning opportunities, my favorite Samuel Beckett quote, and I'm sure I've quoted it before in the podcast, is ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And his concept of failure, that we can improve in the quality of our failures, we can fail better, indicates that failure might actually be a really important guide for us. Yeah. So it's not allowing ourselves to get demoralized through failure. It's allowing failure to be something that is part of that boost up. Yeah. So the second component after direct experiences is vicarious experiences, particularly first through observational learning. That means that you watch other people do the thing that you want to do. And the reason why that's so important is, well, it's kind of like the 4-minute mile. Nobody could break the 4-minute mile until, was it Owens, right? Jesse Owens?
I don't know the name of the person.
Actually,
it was not Jesse Owens.
I don't think so.
I'm pretty certain it wasn't Jesse Owens. Okay. I don't know the name of the guy.
That was incredibly discrediting. Who's the person who broke the 4-minute mile? It wasn't Owens.
Antonia.
I know.
You don't know who broke the 4-minute mile?
I just failed. I'm going to let myself like accept the failure and use it as an opportunity to do better next time.
I mean, even Google is crying right now.
I know. Right. And if I had access to it, I would look it up. Anyway, but the person who broke the 4-minute mile, who I'm sure somebody will come and let us know. I'll know immediately after the recording the podcast, because I'll go look it up and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, that person. But if I'm not mistaken, as soon as the 4-minute mile was broken, all of a sudden other people were doing it.
Absolutely.
And the powerful lesson is, if you can watch other people do something, we go, oh, it's possible. Right. And that's why people doing inspiring things, that's why contortionists who bend their bodies in all sorts of crazy ways are important, right? People who do parkour are important. Going to the moon, right? Or to Mars is important. Like doing these major feats is important because it communicates, oh, well, if somebody can do that, maybe I can do that. Now, I don't mean like a single individual can necessarily get themselves to the moon, but in that vein, right? Once one person was in space, now other people were in space. And when we can learn through observation, when we can go, they can do it, and that's how they did it, it can start to give us a sense of, oh, maybe I can do it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Already I'm mapping memory, introverted sensing, the preferred function of SJs to this second part here. I'm observing something that came before and I'm getting the learning from that vicariously. That's really powerful.
Yep. So the second part of vicarious experiences is role models. And this is like observational learning, but it's particularly potent when there's similarities between yourself and the person that is your role model. So it's not just seeing that somebody did it, it's having somebody as almost like an inspirational guide. And if the individual is like you, like maybe they share some type preferences with you, maybe they are your same personality type or best fit type, maybe they just share some of your functions. If you watch them go through life and they are succeeding in areas that you would like to succeed, now you go, okay, that's how they did that. Why reinvent the wheel? I'm going to go ahead and follow that model, and then I can get there too. And in terms of cognitive functions, well, you're mapping them right now. So which function do you think maps to this one?
I just have memory mapped to both of these, actually, role models. And I'm actually going to make a point after we go through the whole model. I've got some comments about some of these that are coming up for me as we talk. So I'm making those notes.
Yeah. I also see this maybe, I don't know if it's okay if I make a little note right here.
Sure.
But in some ways it might be a little bit of extroverted thinking too.
Possibly.
Which is, if something works and you've observed somebody create a schematic of how something works, particularly if they're a similar type to you, you can model what they're doing, right?
I think the thinking functions would be the next section, though. Both of them are there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get to the third
And then
part.
I think the final one's the feeling functions. I can like just see it go boop, 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 right down.
Fabulous.
I think the intuitive things are just not the ones in here as much.
Yeah. Maybe it's just the pattern of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
well, it's about direct action.
Right.
It's about feeling like I can take direct action. What does intuition have to do with that?
Right.
Right. I mean, I'm half kidding, but intuition is kind of the opposite of that. It's going the abstraction of things, not getting down to tangibles. So if we're talking about efficacy, it would make sense that intuition is not a lot of part of it. Like it's not part of the entire framework, except to think about the stuff in a meta way.
And perhaps reframing, like learning from failure might be some intuitive reframing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the third component to creating self-efficacy is verbal persuasion. And this is feedback and encouragement. All right. So it's like,
I think it's instruction and feedback is really what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. And it's getting, it's like other people recognizing that you're trying, right? And giving encouragement. They're like watching you try to, they're watching you attempt this thing. And even if you're currently in the failure zone, right, where you're trying to, figure out the ways to do it, not the ways not to do it, having somebody observe it, have your back, give you some high quality feedback, like that's all really important, but it has to be honest. And I think that's, when I talked about trying to float on hot air, the reason why that is never sustainable is we're trying to have faith here that something can happen. And if we know that a part of it is just, it's fluff, right? It's bluster. It's going to be hard to have real faith in that, right? It's going to be hard to have a belief in something that we're already questioning. And even if we want to believe it's true, what was the recent conversation you and I had that we relax around truth and honesty? Yeah. Right. And truth and honesty, like eventually wins out. It just does. Right. Like you can have a lot of years of not, of a lie or just, obfuscation, confusion. You have a ton of time living there, but eventually truth will out. And that includes when we're trying to convince ourselves that we're able to do something. If we tell ourselves falsehoods, if we're immodest, if we puff ourselves up to an unearned place, we're not going to be able to actually ride on that faith, right? That belief, because we're already undermining our own belief by telling ourselves lies. So getting feedback from people who we know won't lie to us, who will be honest with us and our performance. That's a big piece of the encouragement. Like, we need to know when somebody goes, yeah, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
We need to be able to hold that information. So then when they go, okay, now you nailed it, we can believe them, right?
Yeah.
Because we're following, we're sniffing the trail of truth.
And this to me maps to accuracy, introverted thinking, preferred function of all the TPs in the Myers-Briggs system. This idea of feedback, getting the truth, getting calibration.
Yeah.
Again, I'm overgeneralizing and I'm over patterning these things. Clearly this can come from all different energies, but it feels like that's the energy of the tool that they'll be used in this portion of this section.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then the second part of verbal persuasion is mentoring. Coaches and or coaching and mentoring.
Extroverted thinking effectiveness, direct coaching to get the thing done. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Here's how you do it.
Yep.
Right here.
Yeah. Effective guidance.
Yep.
Basically. And reassurance that it can be done. Right. And here's a map, right? Or here's how to do it. And that's also very important.
And this is the preferred function of all TJs in the Myers-Briggs system. And you can already see people clustering around this, like people that use accuracy or introverted thinking tend to be about feedback and calibration and verbal sparring, right?
Yeah.
To refine.
Even encouragement, actually.
And encouragement sometimes, yeah. And then extroverted thinking or effectiveness, TJs in the Myers-Briggs system. This is about coaching, mentoring, step by step. Let's get it done. Let's execute on this. Like, you can already see people, like if you're one of these personality types, you probably gravitate toward one or the other of these when you're in this category of verbal persuasion.
Yeah. Okay. So the fourth component of self-efficacy, or a source of it, is emotional and physiological states. So it's an ability to interpret states well, meaning that when we're in a bad space, right, we're already lacking resource, or we have high tension or stress or whatever the situation.
Yeah.
It's really easy for us to grab that baggage and bring it into the current struggle that we're dealing with. And if you're going through a time period of challenge, you're probably already dealing with a lot of baggage, because what we normally can handle in a time period of resource, which is not that big of a deal to pull some of our real estate, right? Emotional and psychological real estate, but we have it to give. So it's not that big of a deal. When in a time period lacking resource, every little thing feels like a big deal.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we undermine our faith in ourselves just because we're feeling like crap, right? We're just not feeling good. We're stressed. There's other things going on, maybe old traumas, maybe old baggage. And it just undermines and robs our ability to go, I can get through this situation, because it doesn't feel like you can get through anything. Everything feels bigger. So the ability to accurately identify a state, to go, maybe I'm just not feeling good.
Yeah.
Right. You can even go back to that whole HALTS thing, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed, right? It might be a completely unrelated, challenge. It might be an unrelated situation that is coloring your relationship to whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, whatever skill you're trying to build, or whatever is the next phase. If you're bringing a bunch of emotional baggage in, all of it will feel like a heavier lift.
Yeah. State feels to me like it's tied to biography, who I am. Who I am is the state I'm showing up in the moment, right? And there's a lot of parts of us. We look at all the different parts of us that come out, but being in a state is being in kind of an emotional resonance of who I am right here. Again, I think this maps to introverted feeling or authenticity, preferred function for FPs in the Myers-Briggs system. It's all about state change, state management. And I think that, we have to know who we are to feel confident in taking action. And I think that's what this is addressing specifically. Yeah.
And recognize that when we feel bad, it might be unrelated, right? To be able to accurately source our emotions and accurately source why, what's going on? What is the motivation for this particular state?
Yeah.
What's happening underneath? And so that's an important component to a general sense of I can get through it, because if I'm feeling like crap, it might have nothing to do with the thing that I'm trying to accomplish. So maybe I just process that or compartmentalize it for a moment, whatever is appropriate for the situation. And then finally is our mind-body connection. So stress management, being able to, have relaxation training or calming our soma down and being able to, okay, it's going to be all right. Just kind of tension release, having a more control over our body's responses to things through training it. And some people are naturally skilled at that, but there's a lot of people, myself included, that are not, right? We need techniques to be able to get to the other side of stress management, even if we're not sure where the stress came from, like just to be able to calm the body down. Not being able to calm our stress responses to things will make us feel like we can't handle anything. I can't handle it because if I step into that situation, I'll get overwhelmed, right? I'll have like maybe even like a panic attack or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So being able to work through one's body and have that body-mind connection in a good enough relationship to have our minds help control our bodily responses. That's a big part of us believing we can get to the other side of something.
One way to interpret body-mind connection is very esoteric, philosophical, like meditation and tapping into but I read this, and maybe I'm forcing a model that shouldn't be forced, but I honestly read this as our body tells us what we need. Mm-hmm. It surfaces the needs we have and the unmet needs we have as people. So I think this maps to extroverted feeling or harmony. I think it's the FJs prefer this as the function. And I think this would be obvious to somebody that uses those preferences, because they'd say, well, the reason you're hungry is because you haven't eaten. The reason why you feel sluggish, you didn't get enough sleep. You have needs going unmet. That's why your body's not helping you out right now. You could take it more the abstract route with meditation and really training your body and all these, I can sit on a mountain, meditate and be super peaceful in the midst of anything. But I just think it's more practical than that, because we're talking about self-efficacy to have action. Yeah. So let's move it out of the realm of theory and bring it right to harmony. What needs are going unmet? I have them met. Now I believe I can act. Yep. And so I think I really do think all these map to certain functions. And I think if you're listening along to this, I think you're going to start to see, oh yeah, I probably gravitate more toward that. Like I'm more interested in the mind body because maybe I'm an FJ in the Myers-Briggs system, or well, I really am all about the state I'm in, or I'm about teaching or calibrating or whatever it is for you as we walk down through this model. I have more things to say too. I want to unpack on this. Okay. So I want to make sure I don't hijack on your run here of where you're going.
No, I'm complete. I talked about the 4 different ways to get to a feeling of self-efficacy.
So if we tune back to these, I want to unpack some of the takeaways from this, maybe some actions and some things somebody could, listening right now, go and apply in their life. I think, I don't want to go through these too detailed and like make a 1-to-1 map of like cognitive functions or personality types to each of these categories. And I just casually was throwing some things out through this. But let's see if we can draw some action from the pattern that I just did here. So for example, mastery of experience, the direct experience or learning from failure. Again, I think this is in the realm of extroverted sensing or sensation. I think getting into direct action, it's not making a to-do list and go getting things done. Like that's like extroverted thinking or effectiveness. It's, oh, I see that mud puddle. I'm going to go jump in it. Oh, I got wet. Okay, well, I'll jump over the mud puddle. Oh, I hit the edge of it. I still got wet. Okay, I'll jump even further over the mud puddle. Okay, I'm dry now. Like it's like going and just doing the thing and then seeing what happens and then learning from the thing that happened.
Yeah.
You call it a failure. I like to call it calibration. Either way, I think that's what the lesson from this part of the first part of this 4 parts teaches me. And I think you listening would get a lot of benefit from that too.
Well, and I think it's, like you said, you don't want to get too theoretical and make a 1-to-1 correlation. It's not like which of these phases is associated with which function. But I don't think it's inappropriate to encourage people to do more extroverted sensing or sensation.
Yeah, no matter your type.
No matter your type, to get into direct experience. We've coached people who have ESP preferences who are throttled, right? They don't let themselves go have as many experiences as they would like to. Because I think we live in a culture that actively discourages us from taking those leaps. Like it tells us not to do that because, well, what if we fail, right? And so we get this paranoia about failure, which I think is why reframing our relationship to failure is so important, which is a little bit of introverted intuition or perspectives, right? Reframing our relationship to something. Yeah. But it's not so theoretical. It's not just reframing your relationship to failure to do nothing with it. It's to embolden one to give oneself permission to take more direct action. Yeah. And the faster we get into action, the faster we fail, the faster we get to a place where we watch ourselves overcome the failure. And now we're in a place of self-efficacy.
Yeah. And I think what do kids do? They make it playful. Mm-hmm. That's how they're able to get into such direct action, is the stakes are not as high as we adults make them. Mm-hmm. So we have these incredible stakes. They're so high. We put so much pressure on everything. It's got to be this ultimate thing. Kids don't think that way. The reason they're able to take direct actions is I'm going to go jump in that mud puddle and see what happens. Mm-hmm. right? They're just figuring out their world. They're playing and they're testing things all the time. So it's almost like a spirit of testing the world, testing action. Oh, okay. I did that thing. I bet I could feel self-efficacy for something very similarly related. You know, I carved that wooden block. I bet I could build something out of metal. Like this can also translate to other areas. I think we could build self-efficacy by doing one thing and then shift it to something else, also kind of reframing in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like the idea of adding a sense of playfulness.
Yes.
An extroverted sensing or sensation is the function of max aliveness.
Yeah.
So a part of it is also giving ourselves permission to feel alive.
Yeah.
And aliveness can come through both success and failure,
yeah.
right? We're having a human experience. We are alive. This is the thing that's happening.
Yeah.
And not feeling this compulsion to judge every moment. To go, oh, I passed or I failed, or that was good or bad, or what was my impact? It's like, sometimes you're just doing stuff and that's okay too.
Yeah. So I think direct action can be playful. In our physical environment, I think it's really important. It can teach us a lot. The vicarious experiences, I mentioned earlier, I think that's mapped to introverted sensing or memory. That's the preferred function for SJs in the Myers-Briggs system. But, I even have that function as part of my ENFP personality. So it shows up in a lot of different personality types. And we all have to engage with our memories and our past and who we've become over time. So it's not just the purview of SJs or NPs. Like all of us have to do this. It's an energy in the world. We talk about that like in our Life Path program. I think the key learning here, observing, learning, and role models. Who are your role models? How good are the people you're watching and following? Like I mindlessly get on X or Facebook or social media, and I need to be more mindful. This is me personally talking. To curate my feed to be following people that build me and give me inspiration and make me feel a sense of self-efficacy for the things I want to create in the world. If I'm following people that are negative and I'm just downloading all the things that are wrong in the world and what can I do? I might shrug and start to think, well, I can't make any change in the world. Those people told me there's no hope. Like they keep saying that everything's wrong and bad. I've been watching some new stuff and I kind of feel that way. And then I tuned the other day to these two kids or men in their 20s. They're just younger than me. These two gentlemen in their 20s were talking about building the future. And I think I mentioned on the last podcast, and this idea of something hopeful going forward. Like, yeah, I need to be tuned more to those kinds of things, following better role models, listening to people's experience that have been through something that they found joy and happiness and success on the other end.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing I should be tuned to. So I'd ask you to reflect right now, if you're listening along, like, are you following the people that will give you that sense of self-efficacy for the actions you want to take? That's really important.
Yeah. Well, and I understand why you want to highlight the sensing components of these pieces, because it is action, it is groundedness, it is doing things.
Yeah.
That's the only way to get to a place where you believe you can overcome things is by actually doing it, actually overcoming things.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a little bit of extroverted intuition in here as well, which is seeing what's possible.
Yeah.
Right. Part of it is faith. It's optimism. It's an idea that, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Right. And observing what's possible in other people. So I think choosing role models are so important because they're going to be influencing how inspired you are. Right. And like you said, if you're being inspired, right, like I think inspired means like to basically breathe life into something, right? Have breath or pneuma. Who is providing the breath that's going through you, right? Who is inspiring you? And if it's toxic, if it's a spiral downward, if it's making you feel a sense of despair, right? People can breathe life into toxic things, right?
Yeah.
And they can make you feel like there's really no reason to do anything, right? Like you just mentioned. So I think there's a little bit of what's possible. We need to make sure that the people we're following are showing positive examples of what's possible.
Yeah. So I think those two, the mastery of experience and vicarious experiences, they do feel, like you said, there's some intuition in there. They do feel very sensory. The moment we move into verbal persuasion and emotional physiological states, like personally, I'm like, okay, now we're getting more esoteric. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting a little bit more abstract from like taking action and making something happen. Now, we're not talking about the actions. We're talking about the thing that happens before the action, which is the belief I have the capacity to do something.
Well, and it also feels like it might be, as opposed to just directly tackling something, it might be like the resources we need to keep the flywheel spinning.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And so this idea of verbal persuasion, feedback encouragement, or coaching and mentoring, again, feedback encouragement I see is the purview of accuracy. introverted thinking. You have this as a preferred function, Antonia. Your entire career is built around giving people verbal feedback on their lives. Your coaching practice, our courses, like our personal life path coaching, like our mentorship, we do mostly verbal calibration, feedback. We help people on their beliefs. I do a lot of emotional work with people too on the introverted feeling side. But for introverted thinking, I think it is a lot about helping people. It's like these little small belief shifts in the mindset. It's very nuanced sometimes. It's almost like surgery, thought surgery, if you will. And so I think the learning in that specific one is find people that can really land the plane on that. Because I think we look to people who we think can help us and give us some feedback and calibration. Sometimes the people we seek out are theoretically giving us calibration and feedback. They haven't actually walked it. It's just, a theory.
Right. And
they haven't really done something, and they're giving us advice that they themselves have never executed on. So Be very mindful who you're listening to. Who are your feedback loops? Who's in your ear?
Yeah.
Who's in your ear all the time? Is it somebody that actually knows what they're talking about that you can listen to, that can truly calibrate you?
Well, and I think this is important right now too, regardless of what functions it's attached to, because coaching is becoming a really big industry.
Yes.
And everybody wants to be a coach. And it's surprising how many people want to go into coaching around things that they've not done them, like you just mentioned, not done themselves. It's kind of like we had one person one time say, I want to coach coaches. And it's like, well, have you ever done coaching? Not yet, but I'm going to coach coaches. And it's like, but you haven't coached yet. So how do you know what a coach needs? And I don't think it's uncommon for people to enter, like a coaching frame thinking that the theory and the models are enough. You really have to walk through something. You have to know what it feels like to have done that thing in order to give high quality advice around it. So being careful with the coach that you're choosing, making sure that they have either walked that path or done something that's close enough to it to be able to give you, it's like transferable advice, I think is important.
Well, and I just think we go to people like, what do you think about this? Casually sometimes. So when we talk about coaches, we're not even just talking about professional coaches. It's like, well, my friend is the resource I have to ask. So I'll ask them to help me with this feedback. And I'm just saying, be mindful of who you're asking. Do they actually have the ability to help calibrate you? As well as coaches and mentors, which I think is in the purview of extroverted thinking or effectiveness, like I mentioned earlier. And I think this again is looking for somebody that has the methodology that they've actually seen, look at the result, just like extroverted thinking or effectiveness would do. Do they have the result I want? Okay, they probably have the step-by-step to get there too. A lot of people are giving me step-by-steps in my life. And I'm like, you don't have the result that I'm after. So why do you think that's going to do you know what you're actually doing here? So that's the other key as well. In both of these, I think is finding people that actually walk that. And again, it's like you said, it's like building the resource for the action. It's like getting that self-efficacy pulled up. And then the emotional and physiological states, interpretation of state, I think maps to introverted feeling or authenticity. And I think the mind-body connection, you could make it map to
sensing and intuition or anything else, right?
But I take it as my body tells me my needs.
Right.
And I don't believe, if I'm not getting enough sleep at night and I'm waking up tired all day, why can't I feel confident in the thing I'm trying to do and the action I want to take? Well, because I'm tired all the time. So get my need met.
Your son Gunnar, my stepson Gunnar, he's like 17. And, when you're 17, you're moody. So there's nothing new about moodiness, but there was a night where he got like a full night's sleep, like actually slept the whole night like he was supposed to.
For the first time in a long time.
For the first time in a while. And my goodness, was he in a great mood the next day. And so I don't think you're wrong. I think that component of understanding that our emotions may be unrelated to the current challenge, but we're bringing it in. It's like baggage we're bringing into the situation can be very demoralizing. I'm really demoralized about my ability to build skill in this thing. And it's like, well, why? And it's like, well, because I've got all this relationship nonsense over here, or I'm not sleeping well, like we just mentioned, or I've got a bunch of things that are unrelated that are just generally bringing me down. Well, now I lack confidence to be able to do this other thing. And so having an awareness that is a phenomena, right? Like we might be demoralized and discouraged based on totally unrelated criteria.
Yeah.
And so to keep one's finger on the pulse of that requires a bit of emotional intelligence.
Do you think this is an ordered list?
Mm-mm.
Or do you think it's a lateral list? It's just, these are categories.
Yeah.
It's not like you do one before the other in a sequence.
Well, and I also wonder if they all are necessary. Like you basically have to have all of them working in order to rest into one sense of one's belief in oneself. Like the idea that, I mean, I guess we can feel confident in the areas that we're already naturally talented in, regardless of this list. But we're probably providing a lot of this stuff for ourselves in that way because we have a high degree of certainty. So we're creating our own feedback loops. We're creating our own encouragement. We're our own mentor, right? We're already watching ourselves do those things because we've been doing them our whole lives. And so we already have this like history of abundant examples of us getting to the other side.
Yeah.
So if anything's a preferred function, it's like we're already providing this list for ourselves. This is really about things that we don't naturally feel a sense of certainty around, that we naturally feel demoralized around, or like uncertain, or like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. These are to buoy those aspects up, to go, well, maybe you need help, right? Maybe it's outside of your capacity to do it all on your own, like you're used to doing with your preferred functions or areas of life that draw on your preferred functions. And so if the fact that you have weaknesses, if the fact that you have a sense of uncertainty in every area of your life is undermining your self-confidence in totality, well, then this is a list of things that will bring that holistic feeling about the self back up.
So the good news is there's probably many things in your life, if you're listening right now, that you believe you have the capacity to execute on or make action steps for, and then you can actually do that. Right. Like there's probably things you have to do all the time. Maybe it's your job, maybe it's your school. And I think I've got many of them. You have many of them, Antonia. So what the actual challenge today is to look at your life and think, okay, where's a gap? What's one of the gaps I have where I don't believe I have the capacity for X action or XYZ behavior change? Like what is the thing that I want? How do I want to be? What is the learning that I have that I want to create behavior change around, but I just don't have that belief? And then maybe look and see, where is the deficiency off this list? Like maybe I would probably say that we also cluster. I would think like I would run towards state change and the interpretation of my state. I'm an introverted feeling authenticity user.
That's got to be it.
If I get in the right state, anything's possible, but maybe I don't have sleep that night, or maybe I have no direct experience of it. So I try it and I'm like, oh, I feel really uncertain, or I can't make that thing happen, because it's all about, I overvalue the being in the right state of emotion, right? And clearing all that out and being in the right present. And I've had that happen. I've gotten up literally on stage to do something, feeling I've got self-efficacy, overvaluing the state I'm in. Where are my notes? What was I going to say? I don't know. Oh crap. My mind's blank. I'm in the right state, but it's still not working. I don't have my, that kind of thing. So you also might be overvaluing one of these areas, and then you have a gap in some of these areas in order to feel confident for the action. So I think that's the thing I would attune you to is if you have one of our owner's manuals, looking at your car model, seeing your cognitive functions, your learning and decision-making functions. So we mentioned a lot of functions here. So you're going to see how those map to your personality from your car model. And then being able to identify, okay, I see where I'm really overvaluing this one, or I've got this missing in order to feel confident to take the action I want to make the change for in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it's role models. I always struggle to find role models. I just don't think I naturally think in terms of being inspired by other people. And so when I find a really good role model, I kind of feel like I'm invincible, because I'm like, well, I found somebody who can teach me how to think about this thing. And so, and whereas I probably overvalue feedback and encouragement, which I think is both introverted thinking and extroverted feeling, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, it's always something we get back later.
But that said, I think your instinct to encourage the listener to not just see this in terms of theory, but in terms of action taking. We are taking less and less action in our lives all the time. I think we are discouraged and throttled from action taking. I think that society has done a very good job of communicating to us that if we do something wrong, we'll never be forgiven for it. And it will go on our permanent record, so to speak, right, in some form. And so, and then also we've gotten a lot of communication that we have to have the right answer, right? We have a whole generation of people who are what's called taught to the test, meaning that all of the education was in getting the right answers on tests. Yeah. As opposed to being able to figure out how to find the right answer. It's about already knowing the right answer, and not as much focus is on the process of it. So there's a process to self-belief. There's a process to self-confidence. It's not just something that we either have or don't have. There's an entire formula to it. And this is part of that formula. We did a whole series of podcasts on what I call the selves: self-trust, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, all of those things. And when we went through all of those podcasts, or we created those podcasts, to me, it became very clear to me that there is a formula to belief in oneself, right? It's not a spider bite. We don't, it's like Spider-Man got bit by a spider and he had superpowers. We don't get bit by a self-confidence spider. We don't get bit by a self-efficacy spider. It's not binary. It's not on or off. It is a process. And if we can get ourselves through the process and we can convince ourselves to take the plunge, do the thing, fail, reevaluate what failure means to us, get mentors, watch other people do it, make sure that we're in a good space, right? Make sure we have our finger on the pulse of our emotions. Let's get our needs met. Let's make sure that we have encouragement. We're not supposed to do it alone. We're supposed to do it together. If we have all of these factors in the system running, all these nodes are in place, then self-efficacy, a belief in oneself, becomes the inevitable emergent of the system running. So I think that's really the final call, or the final sort of statement that I would make is it doesn't happen by accident, right? If we want greater belief in ourselves to overcome challenges in our lives, this is the formula of how to make it happen.
Yeah. So what do you think? You've been listening along. You're the third person in this conversation. You have not had a microphone yet, but you can come over to personalityhacker.com directly below this episode, leave a comment, ask a question, more importantly, share your story. Do you identify this idea of learning something, wanting to change a behavior, but I just don't feel confident. I don't feel like I've got self-efficacy for that. And did you resonate with some of these categories we talked about, some of these ideas on how to feel more self-efficacy in order to take those actions and change the behaviors you want to change in your life? And did you see maybe some of the elements as you're looking through maybe your owner's manual that we have here at Personality Hacker for all the 16 personality types, and you've got your car model in front of you? Are you identifying which parts of your personality are attuned to some of these ideas we talked about? Maybe some of the parts that you're getting hijacked or stalled out in, or you just don't feel the confidence for. I would love to hear that. Come over to personalityhacker.com and make your voice heard.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, it would make me very happy. I would love to see the review, not just a rating, but also the review. You might be watching us on YouTube, but since we have a video podcast, you can subscribe, and hit the bell to let you know when new episodes come out as well. And you can leave a comment for us there. I tend to read all the comments. Do you read the comments? You don't read comments. I read comments.
I sometimes read comments.
Yeah. I like the
comments. You read every comment.
I read all the comments. So
every comment.
So let us know what you thought of the episode there as well. And we also want to encourage you. We have our Personality Life Path program that opens up on a regular basis. And it is an absolutely phenomenal, life-changing program, in my opinion. So if it is the time for Life Path, the best way to know when that program is coming up is to head over to personalityhacker.com and get your name on our email list. We can let you know what all the programs that we're running when they come out, and of course you get a weekly reminder of the podcast as well. So I would highly recommend that you consider joining the Life Path program.
Don't consider it. You should just do it. INTP Will, our friend, he's been on the podcast before. He is part of our profiler training program, but he's not been in PLP yet, Personality Life Path. And he said, I'm kind of driven crazy because all the people that have gone through Personality Life Path, they keep raving about it. And they're like, you guys haven't opened enrollment yet. And they're like, this has been life-changing, one person after another. He's like, I don't even fully understand what it is yet, but I cannot deny how many people have said it's changed their lives. And they're not hyperbolic about it. Like, it literally has altered, like they've changed their career. They've changed their trajectory. Like, the whole point of the 8-week program is to help you identify all of the 8 cognitive functions in the Myers-Briggs system, like Carl Jung talked about. What's your relationship to the energy that function represents in the world? And then how do you work on the areas of your life that are stopping you from getting what you want, or the trajectory of the life path you want to be on?
Yep.
And we kind of put this program together to see what would happen. And we're now multiple cycles through.
Yeah.
And it is amazing how many people are changing their lives, literally making life altering decisions over it in the positive, and all the feedback. And I love it. So you should not consider this.
Yeah, you should just join it.
When we open enrollment, you need to be part of this, because this is a fantastic mentorship.
It really is. I mean, I love Profiler training. Don't get me wrong. That's still the flagship program. I love doing Profiler training, but Personality Life Path is my heart right now.
It is. I stand behind it 100%.
Me too. Yeah.
It's incredible. All right. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you maybe in the Personality Life Path Mentorship if you get to join that, or obviously next week here on the Personality Hacker Podcast. Hey, it's Joel from Personality Hacker. So a big reason people get into personality types is usually to improve their relationships with other people. And you can understand key differences between you and someone else when you understand how type works. So clearly, personality type is applied to relationships. But what about the relationship with yourself? Well, personality type can also help you navigate your career, or maybe an educational path that you need to follow, or other opportunities that present themselves, and it helps you know which are the right choice for you. And ultimately, personality is the key to unlocking identity-level worldview and life purpose. It all starts with getting the owner's manual for your personality type. In this owner's manual, we cover the basics of your personality, and then we dive a layer deeper to connect your personality to your relationships, your career, your worldview, and identity, because we believe it's your life, and it should be designed for your personality. So start your owner's manual journey at personalityhacker.com. When you access your owner's manual, I recommend focusing on the ideal day exercise first, because when you start crafting your ideal day, you're being mindful about the type of lifestyle that you want. So designing a life around how you're naturally wired makes sense, and you can finally stop fighting yourself. So come discover and develop your unique personality at personalityhacker.com.